Stephen Joyce.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, if that wasn't so sad, it would be funny. I mean, that really was an appalling attempt to pull out the old leaf out of the Labor Party playbook, which is when you are in desperate trouble, when your leader's in a bit of difficulty, then reheat an old allegation from months ago, drag it out and pretend it's new stuff from Mr. Robertson, but only because his leader is in trouble of his own, Mr. Speaker. And that's the reality of it, because the Labor Party got a problem. They're a shrill, out-of-touch opposition party, and they decided what they needed after getting a trouncing in the 2011 election was a fresh public face to speed them back into office in 2014. They wanted a shortcut. They didn't want to change any of their policies. In fact, they didn't want to change any of their long-standing members. What they wanted was a shortcut back to the Treasury benches. So they cast around the caucus. They found a guy. He couldn't actually string several words together, but they found him and they said, he can be the modern face of the party. Send him out there and actually get him to talk about the fact that he wasn't a politician, he was an anti-politician, and that he wouldn't play gotcha politics, and he would actually just talk about what New Zealanders wanted. And it didn't work. He didn't say anything. He didn't do anything. He was a rabbit they couldn't get to run. So very quickly the old Labor Party reasserted itself and started getting him to say some things that were palpably going to be contradicted. And this one is the one that's caught him this week, Mr. Speaker. On the Thursday, the 26th of July last year, he said in regards to John Banks that because he'd forgotten something, he said this, on the basis of his memory lapse alone, John Banks is not fit to serve as a minister. That's the standard that this Mr. Shearer set, Mr. Speaker. And then, of course, we have the issue of the last few days when quite palpably he cannot meet that standard himself, because he has had to go out there and correct his pecuniary register. Now, there's no problem with that. Members do make mistakes with their pecuniary register and they have to go and fix it. But this member has made the mistake 4 years in a row. It's 4 years in a row he hasn't actually got round to doing it. And weirdly, he was able to tell the IRD he had this offshore bank account for each of those 4 years as he filed his tax return. So he didn't remember it for his pecuniary register, but he remembered it to the IRD. And that, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, is very hard to believe. But OK, so maybe he's the sort of person that has a lazy 50k lying around somewhere. Maybe he is. But if that's the case, then why won't he tell us the amount that's in the account? Because that would actually help us understand whether he was just forgetful. Because maybe it is OK to forget 50k. But is it OK to forget, let's say, over 100k, as he sort of admitted last night on the Radio Live? Or is it maybe 200 or 300k? And he's saying it's between him and his family. What he's saying is it's embarrassing and I don't want to talk about it anymore, Mr. Speaker. So his problem is he's hoisted by his own petard. Nobody's saying it's the world's worst thing, except he was the guy that turned around last year and said of John Banks that on a memory lapse alone he should not be in Parliament. He also said, by the way, Mr. Speaker, he also said that John Key was in trouble because he had a brain fade. Well, this is the biggest brain fade I've seen in 4 years in this Parliament, because it's not once, it's twice, it's 3 times, it's 4 times. But that's not so bad, Mr. Speaker, because the other attempt of this leader of the opposition has been to play gotcha politics on OAG reports. And hasn't that ended badly, Mr. Speaker? Hasn't that ended badly? Spent his time harumphing away about the convention centre report and going on about how it was terrible. And then weirdly, Mr. Speaker, not the same issues with another report that came out which sort of suggests that actually there was a hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil Associate Immigration Minister who didn't ask why it was that he disagreed with officials, who didn't want to know, he didn't ask the questions. He was sent in to do one citizenship application, which weirdly was for a donor of the Labor Party, Mr. Speaker, and then that person miraculously got his citizenship, Mr. Speaker, and the next day was presented with a citizenship ceremony at Parliament, Mr. Speaker, and somehow that's okay. That's just fine. whereas compared to the convention centre, that's a million miles off being fine. That is absolute rubbish, and it is absolutely hypocritical of this guy.
Expired. Dennis O'Rourke.
Mr Speaker, the government has made the Christchurch rebuild a top priority. It's putting